at Talk Radio. Before we get to any of that, let's talk to the head of the Young Voices UK organisation, Jason Reed. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Kevin.
Now, I say this with a mind to not being too London-centric, but what happens here tends to happen around the country. Sadiq Khan, our marvellous mayor, and I use the word marvellous satirically, he's dreadful, he's plotting to sort of end the congestion charge as it stands, which is basically 15 quid if you want to drive into the centre of town. And he's going to charge motorists in the future by the mile to drive into town, which means that it'll cost you considerably more than 15 quid to make a single journey, 20, 30 pounds to drive 3 miles into town or something. Now, if he gets this in, this will happen in other cities around the country. This is anti-motorist, anti-car. Frankly, I think Sadiq Khan is an old-fashioned Labour politician who feels that anyone who owns a car must be a rich Tory. Well, he's punishing ordinary people who aren't necessarily rich Tories, isn't he?
Well, you know full well, of course, Kevin, that I'm no fan of Sadiq Khan, but I'm afraid I do have to disagree with you on this. I think this is an eminently sensible proposal. I think it's much fairer than the current system, because the current system asks people who drive less to subsidise everyone who drives more. If there's a little old lady who only does one journey a week to go to the shops down the road, and she has to pay exactly the same rates of congestion charge or as road tax as people who commute every day and can cause congestion and cause pollution in the busiest areas of London. And so I think the principle of pricing road usage by the distance you travel, in addition to other things, of course, like the time of day that you're travelling and the type of car that you're driving, is a sensible way of doing it.
Well, in my ideal world, there'd be no such thing as the congestion charge. You should be able to drive wherever you want. It's a free country.
But when you drive, you create externalities, don't you? You pollute the air. We all have to breathe in the air that is as a result of cars that drive through the streets that we're walking on. And of course, it causes congestion, which affects everyone, whether you're in a taxi, whether you're on a bus using public transport. The congestion that is caused by traffic affects absolutely everyone. But this is a proven system that's been implemented around the world and does work. In Singapore, for example, they implemented it and it's been extremely successful. Could you guess, Kevin, what the average speed on London roads is at peak times, the average traffic speed? Because it's extremely low. What would you say it is?
I don't know. You tell me. Go on. 7
miles an hour.
Is it?
Which I think is appalling.
I don't think I've ever reached such heady speeds in central London, actually. But yes, I mean, London is pretty much gridlocked, and I'm not convinced the congestion charge has ever done anything about traffic. I just think it's been a way to raise revenue.
I think you might be right about that, and the congestion charge is certainly very inefficient. And taxing cars in that way more broadly is sort of taking a sledgehammer to a nut. It doesn't really get to the heart of the issue, whereas I think road pricing does. I think if you want to use the road, which of course everyone should have the right to do, no one's talking about banning cars or closing roads or anything like that. But if you want to drive, you should have to then pay for the privilege to do that.
But you do, Jason. It's called road tax. So you pay your tax, your car tax. Why should you be charged again?
This is a much fairer way of doing road tax.
No, but you will already buy your car tax. You have to do that, and then you get charged again with this congestion charge, which will go up due to this per mile system. I take your point about not penalising old grannies who only go down the road once a week and all that, but that you are double taxed with a congestion charge.
Well, in an ideal world, we'd have road pricing to replace the road tax and the congestion charge altogether, although I don't have a great deal of faith that Sadiq Khan would do that because he is a Labour politician. But in principle, I think this is a much more sensible way of doing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see certainly a decrease in the congestion charge at the very least in London as a result of this road pricing scheme, if it does go through, because we don't want to be making it too expensive to the point that it's inaccessible for poorer people who don't have any other option. But in a city like London, you can use public transport anyway, which benefits, as I was saying, from a road pricing scheme. So I don't think it's it's cutting anyone off. It's not going to contribute to the cost of living crisis. It just makes our city flow a little bit more smoothly, and that seems to me to be a good thing.
I mean, now you made me think now, and I'd probably do quite well out of it, because I very rarely drive into town, and if I do, it's probably a couple of miles, so I could save myself a few quid. I'm warming to this plan. No, I'm not. I don't agree with congestion charges, because I just don't believe they're anything to do with congestion or pollution. They're just a means of raising revenue, a bit like so many parking tickets. Let's talk on a more general basis, because I know you want to talk about this, because London is relevant to this conversation as well. We're coming to the end, aren't we, of the COVID crisis? There are signs that they're going to lift these absurd Plan B restrictions, including vaccine passports, which they should never have brought in. That's an absolute scandal they ever did, because they don't work. But it is time now, is it not, for the government, and indeed Sadiq Khan, to turn round to the people and say, from now on, we'll leave it in your responsible hands to act responsibly, be slightly cautious, but no more government restrictions.
They should have done that a long, long time ago. It's past time to be to have the responsibility put back in our own hands, to make our own choices about when we want to wear a mask and when it's safe to go out and when it's safe to attend events and so on. A similar announcement was made by Nicola Sturgeon, as was reported in the news bulletin at the top of the hour, that she's planning to roll back restrictions, which is pretty incredible, given that it was just last week she was saying we're going to need mask mandates for 7 years. And now she's conceded, apparently, the fact that we don't need to have restrictions anymore. Boris Johnson is under pressure to roll back Plan B restrictions. Sadiq Khan and other leaders around the country are going to be under similar pressure to roll back restrictions, because we simply don't need them. We haven't needed them for a long time. We all know that Omicron is a much milder variant than any variant that's gone before. It's highly likely that any future variants will be even milder still, even if they are a little bit more transmissible, which means we don't have to worry about this anymore. The pandemic is effectively over. We need to be going back to normal life, and we need to turn ourselves off this path towards a new normal where the state can resort to these draconian powers anytime it likes, which should be reserved for the absolute worst emergency, if ever.
Need to just very quickly, I'm going to ask for a one-word answer, because I've got to move on, Jason. Will Boris survive?
I fear he will. I think he's sticking around for a while.
Yes, maybe May. We'll see. Interesting times, though. Great to talk to you, Jason. Let's talk again soon. Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK. We've got some